Hello, my name is Carmen Capriles. Um, I am in La Paz, Bolivia. I'm from a small organization called Reacción Climática, which aims to raise awareness to the public about the problems that are related to climate change. I'm really happy to be able to join you in this workshop. And the issue that we are going to be talking about is how to lobby for change on biodiversity issues using communication and outreach campaigns, and how to build a strategic plan for communications and outreach. Well, as I was telling you, I am part of a small organization, and one of the campaigns that it works on, it's the Saving Madidi campaign. Madidi is a protected area here in Bolivia. It's quite big, and it's one of the hotspots of conservation of biodiversity, which means that is one of the places with more biodiversity probably in the world. It should be like within the top 15 places in the world with more biodiversity. Where this biodiversity comes from, it's because this protected area goes from the Andes mountain range to the Amazonian. We're talking about 6,000 meters above sea level to around a few hundred meters above sea level. And in all these places, we have small clusters of different ecosystems, each one with its particular characteristics and each one with its particular ways of life. Therefore, it's important to take care and to raise awareness about this protected area. So, how do we start doing this job? Well, the first thing that we have to do is lobby. What do we understand by lobby is influencing a certain part of the population or some kind of authority or some kind of important people that can align with our cause and explaining them why is there the importance. So one of the first steps that we need to identify is the population we want to influence, the population that we want to uh, make lobby, and not only the population but specific people. So because, for example, if you're living in an urban area, how can you convince people that they need to take care of this protected area which is hundreds of kilometers away from their daily lives? And that's where information comes. And the first step is to identify the public we want to influence. The second step should be to uh, gather the more information that we can about where or what we want to advocate. For example, we need to know what ecosystems, the area of the protected area, what ecosystems holds within, which are the emblematic species. And in biodiversity, working with animals, it's a great way to create empathy with the public we want to influence. Because since it's so big, we need to concentrate in one specific issue. For example, right now, Madrid is home for jaguars, for the Bolivian jaguar, which is called scientific name Pantera onca. So it's therefore important to gather as much information as we can about the place and start identifying these things that are important. Or for example, there is a monkey which it's not found in any other place in the world. That means that there are endemic species, species that you can only find in this particular ecosystem, which means that they are only in this country and that you cannot find them anywhere else. So we have to gather all that information uh, in order to see who do we want to influence. And of all that information, we need to select which one is more important and which one is going to generate more empathy with the people that we want to influence. Uh, Therefore, the second step is to have a strategy. What's the strategy based on? The strategy has to be, well, the outreach campaign, which is based on a strategy, it's a series of steps that we are going to take in order to generate this change that we want. And basically is that people align with our causes to protect or conserve biodiversity, whether it's ecosystems, whether it's a special species or a number of species, or whether it's, for example, genes. Uh, then we were talking about like the first step, which is lobbying, uh, identifying our population, influencing that population, convincing them why it's important to take care of the jaguars, why it's important that these ecosystems uh, uh, can survive. And in this case, one of the important reasons to take care of Madidi is water, because it's one source of water. And the other one is because it's a climatic regulator, since we have all these very complex ecosystems that are working all these components in order to generate all this life. We know that it generates like evapotranspiration, which uh, later becomes clouds, and that those clouds will reach the mountain ranges and they are going to generate rain in different altitudes and in different places. But what happens if deforestation goes on? Then there's not going to be enough, it's going to alter the system of clouds. And not only that, it's because when you deforestate, basically you use the burning, slash and burning system. When you use that system, it generates black carbon. Black carbon will go up with the rest of the clouds and will stick to glaciers. As long as making these glaciers darker, they will absorb more sun heat, and then they are going to melt faster. That is going to impact directly one of our main sources of water for the city of La Paz, which are these glaciers, Andean glaciers. Therefore, if we can explain that, if we can build a message around that that is easy for people to understand, then people are going to see what is the importance of taking care of this ecosystem. That is not only because jaguars are nice and jaguars are cool and we want jaguars to exist, but it's because it's going to have a direct influence among our lives. Then we have to keep on investigating, researching, finding the latest information that we have about the place, and talking with data. What happens is that we've been trying to advocate against this sugarcane refinery. What happens is that the government still did this refinery in, at the north part of the park. Now there is a huge deforestation for sugarcane. And there isn't that much of a demand for sugar in the country. And there are other things that you can use to supplant this commodity. For example, honey or stevia, which is a plant that it's 300 times more sweeter than sugarcane, for example, than sugar, normal sugar. And to grow, to have this refinery working, we need lots of spaces that need to be deforested and that where they are going to be sugarcane. But sugarcane is a crop that takes everything from the soil. Once it gets all these nutrients from the soil, then this soil stops producing. And what happens in most of the tropical soils around the planet is that they are not as fertile as soils that are from 60 degrees north or south. Tropical soils are very thin layers of soil, around 15 centimeters, which means that they are very uh, very thin. So what happens when you put a monocrop? It gets in a few years all the nutrients from the soil, and then the soil is not fertile anymore. Therefore, you need to either fertilizer with chemics or um, other kinds of fertilizers, but then you are destroying soil. And the other thing is that there are there are patches of primary vegetation in all this protected area. These patches of primary vegetation are unique. It means that they have not been intervened by humans yet. But what happens once humans intervene these patches of primary vegetation, then it will come a succession and we'll have secondary uh, succession of vegetation, which means a different set of plants and animals and probably crops from humans around. Um, this has a direct implication on biodiversity because it reduces it, because only secondary vegetation succession of vegetation usually it's much more. It has less species. Mm, some of them take a very short time to reproduce and so on. And these big species like big trees or um, that basically sustain the Amazonian and the tropical forests are going to are gone. Therefore, it's also important to take these things into account. Most people think that the tropics are very rich because we see all these jungles and we see all this vegetation. But once we get into it and we start learning about it and we find out that the soil is so small, we understand why these trees have these huge leaves. Because once they fall into the ground, they are fertilizing it again. So it's a whole cycle. Usually, when we put crops, and especially with monocrops, what happens is that we break that cycle. So the soil again will not have enough nutrients to keep giving life. So once we have identified this kind of problems, it's also important to identify these messages that we want to share with people so they understand why the importance of taking care of these ecosystems. And therefore, one of the strategies right now in order to protect this forest would be to do a campaign against sugar, for example. Actually, sugar can do more harm to environment and especially tropical forests than, for example, another kind of monocrops. And in some places, we have seen that that has happened with palm oil, for example. And in there has been campaigns, for example, against Unilever. Probably you all know Unilever. Unilever is it's a brand, a transnational brand, which produces soaps and food and lots of things that are um, have kind of like the same compounds, which is really very weird. But Greenpeace, for example, did a strong campaign against palm oil and Unilever in order to protect orangutans. You can you can find it you can Google it, and it had succeed because a certain percentage of palm oil around the world uh, belonged to Unilever. Unilever was using all these crops in order uh, to uh, uh, to have all these products that we you can find probably in your kitchen or in your bathroom. Uh, so using orangutans was a good way for people to relate, to generate empathy, and to be able to stop using these products and to put pressure uh, on this transnational in order to stop on reducing their palm oil crops, especially in new lands. So they keep on using palm oil, but they try to, or at least that's what they say, to do it in all deforested areas. That also happens with enterprises like PepsiCo that also burns lots of forest in order to have um, palm oil that goes to your Doritos, for example. And if there has also been a number of campaigns that have addressed this issue, and also PepsiCo has reduced the use of palm oil and the new crops. Anyway, we still need to take into account and to keep a watch on these processes, which deforest and they don't leave anything. They just take this huge places of high biodiversity and they turn it only into plantations of palm oil that also have a high pressure on local people that are either forced to work on these places or put a pressure on the resources they used to have before these crops came. Therefore, it's important that people, especially in urban areas, and especially those that have more information, access to to social media and to other means of communication, that they know what's going on in order to take action. Then the other thing is to go to identify authorities or important people that can relate to your cause. It can be like, for example, a singer in a very popular singer or an actor or somebody that has some kind um, of get to the people in order to ask them to help you advocate for this cause. So that's one way to do it. It's not always easy, but if you have access to that, it's a great way to create awareness. The other one is to acknowledge the authorities that have the power to give, for example, permissions, deforestation permissions, or any kind of permission that these companies need in order to go into these different forests and start doing these plantations. The other way is to um, reach to ministers of environment or high authorities on environment because most of their mandates around the world of environment ministers is to take care of the environment. Therefore, they should be aware that people is keeping an eye on these issues and that are taking actions in order to uh, take care to have conservation actions or any kind of action that could help this these places not to be more distracted. Most of the environmental ministers are quite good at doing that, but if the civil society is not keeping an eye and it's not putting pressure on environmental issues, then probably some other companies or some other or authorities which are higher will put pressure on these environmental ministers in order to have these projects, any kind of project, to be placed on protected areas or in any area that we want to conserve. The other thing would be to put pressure either on the president or other authorities that have more power to do something for these places. Um, those are more complex strategies because it's not always easy to get to these very high authorities. So you can do it at international level. Now there is a number of petition sites that you can use, for example, change.org or abas.org, in order to have a petition, very clear petition to the president or any authority and to start engaging people with the cause and start asking signatures online so people can relate to to this to these issues. And there are a number of campaigns that have been successful in this field. You can enter to any of these sites and see what campaigns have uh, have succeeded and what and in order to identify what have been the issues that have motivated more people to engage with these causes that usually are related to protection or to conservation. Um, the other field where we can advocate or to lobby is around international fora, and that's where we have, for example, the meetings of the conventions on climate change, the conventions on biodiversity, where you have a lot of international actors. Some of them are NGOs, some of them are indigenous people, and most of them are actually the parties, the 196 parties that are part of the UN system, the United Nations system. And it's a place where you can access some uh, of these spaces where you can either meet with the representatives of the country or you can network with different NGOs, especially big NGOs, like, for example, international conservation or bigger networks of NGOs, like depending on the issue, uh, WWF or mm, some other networks, depending on what kind of actions you want to take and what is your main aim in order to do conservation. Well, these are some of the tools that you can use in order to have this outreach for any campaign that wants to generate change around biodiversity issues. I hope this information was useful. I hope uh, uh, it helps with your aims to generate change around any conservation issue. And please, my contact, you can use you can try you can use my contact anytime if you need more information or more guidance in order to have any kind of help or support for whatever campaign you're doing. It was really nice talking to you. Thank you very much. Namaste and see you the next time. Bye bye.